Here on the Spector Creative channel, we talk toys. Mostly I talk action figures, but I also like to talk other categories of toys, and one of the categories of toys I personally really like are board games. And my personal favorite is Monopoly. I did a video a while back about Monopoly, about some of sort of the things people don't realize about it, like the way how when you add more money artificially into the game, like with free parking, you artificially extend the game. What I really like about Monopoly is the standardization. In other words, every Monopoly set is the same. So regardless of which themed Monopoly you buy, and nowadays there's more themes for Monopoly than there ever has been, this is a cool trend, and hey, if you like Bob Ross, you can have Bob Ross Monopoly. But no matter what theme, everything is always consistent. And that is the key to winning Monopoly. Let me explain what I mean by that. So let's look at Boardwalk, right? If it's called Boardwalk. So in the traditional Monopoly game, Boardwalk has a rent of $50, and if you've built it up to a hotel and improved the property, it now is going to charge $2,000. Well, if that property is called, say, Coruscant in the Star Wars Monopoly game, it's the same thing. You may be building cities and spaceports, but rent and improvement prices are the exact same. And the exact same rule applies with things like chance and community chest cards. They may not be called Chance or Community Chest in different licensed versions, and they might have different artwork and different ways of, encouraging you to move around the board, but it's going to be the exact same path. Whether you're being sent to Boardwalk or being sent to Coruscant, it's the same. So that's why Monopoly is all a game of percentages. And I want to take you through a video to show you how these and some top secret tricks can help you win Monopoly every single time. Hey, I won my first date with my college girlfriend by saying I could beat her in 20 minutes, and I did. All right, so how did I do that? How do I win at Monopoly? It's all about understanding the percentages of each color group. So first off, when you come around Go, you're going to encounter the dark purples, Baltic and Mediterranean. I'm going to use the traditional names. I'm not going to use any of the licensed names for, sanity's sake. So this color group has a 24% chance that you're going to land on it, which is pretty darn low. But there is a major advantage to this group, and that's the fact that building all the way up to a hotel on Baltic Avenue is relatively cheap. It only costs $50 per house and $50 then for a hotel after you have 4 houses to build up, which means for the low price of $250, you can build a hotel on Baltic and then another one on Mediterranean for the same price. And that's going to hit your opponent with a $450 staying fee. So yeah, that's actually a pretty good investment. $250 for every time they hit it, $450. Next up, we've got the light blues. Now, same thing, low cost of housing here. We're still dealing with $50 a house. And it's got a bit of a higher percentage as far as landing, 39% every time you go around the board. But there really isn't anything super special, except for the fact that they're adjacent to Go. It's not going to be too hard to improve the properties, but they're not going to bring you that much. If you like less expensive properties and ones that are easy to improve, they're a great deal for you. But I tend to really look at what's coming around the corner because we've got a shiny, shiny awesomeness on the next strip. So once you make it around the just visiting square on jail, which hopefully you're not in jail and you're continuing around the board, now you are in winner territory. This is the side of the board where everything happens. So first up, we have the light purples, Virginia, State, and St. Charles Place. So these are some of the better properties, but they're adjacent to some of the best. Now there's a 43% chance you're going to land on the light purples every time you go around the board. A lot of this has to do with dice rolls and adjacency to jail, but more so when we get to the oranges. The buildings are still affordable. We're only talking $100 per house as opposed to $50 on the first side of the board, so it's still at least affordable to improve your properties. It's not a huge investment, but we're soon about to get into the oranges. This is where you can kill it and devastate your opponent. So the oranges are at the end of the second strip, right before free parking. These are some of the best properties you can have. Not only is it relatively low cost to improve it, but the statistics work every single time. And this is what I mean by Monopoly being a game of percentages. It pays off all right here with the oranges, and to a lesser degree with the reds around the corner. So you have a 50% chance of landing on the oranges every time you go around the board. 50% of the time you're going to land on them. Why is this? Well, multiple cards send you to jail, as well as other reasons you'll go to jail, such as landing on the go to jail square in the top left corner, and there's a St. Charles Place card sending you there. Because of the probability of how dice work when you have two die, which you do in Monopoly, the most common rolls are going to be 6, 7, and 8. Well, what lies 6, 7, and 8 squares away from jail? The oranges. That's why the oranges have a higher chance than any other property group in the entire board of being landed on. And likewise, the reds right around the corner become sort of a double-headed sort of monster to take on your opponent, because if you can own both the oranges and the reds, they're pretty much unavoidable, at least as far as going around the board. There is a higher price for improving the properties. We're now up to 150, but this is one of those times where it actually is worth it and worth the investment. Because if you can own both the oranges and the reds and sort of have that free parking corner, if you will, and remember, free parking doesn't do anything in traditional Monopoly, well, you have a 49% chance of landing on the reds, compared to the 50% chance of the oranges. That means you're pretty much guaranteed to land on one of them every time you go around the board. So, if you are the lucky owner of both of these, combined with the fact that there's a chance card that actually sends people to Illinois Avenue, essentially all roads will lead opponents to this pit, to your real estate investment. And you can absolutely devastate your opponents by building up your improvements on these and essentially creating a vice that they can't escape. You're going to hit the oranges and reds, one or the other, every time you go around the board. And because they are relatively inexpensive to improve, it can be done so without too much of an investment. All right, as we continue around the board, now we're getting to the expensive part of town. And while there are people who really like the expensive properties and improving the expensive properties, as we get up to the $150 and $200 per house, well, it's a lot of money you're going to invest in order to get higher rent. First up are the yellows, which have the same improvement costs as the reds, but they don't have the advantage of being close to jail and all of the other advantages that are on the light purple and orange side. So, yeah, there's definitely not going to be a special card that sends you to an orange the way you have a special card sending you to Illinois Avenue, which is why the yellows are not as desirable as the reds, even though the improvement costs are the same, housing being $150 for both. You have a 45% chance of landing on the yellows while you're going around the board, and again, while they're nice and they're expensive, it's not mathematically the side, or rather the properties, you're going to hit the most. The final side is your really expensive section of town. And a lot of people tend to look at this as, oh, these are the dream properties. I have to have properties here in order to win the game. But honestly, that's just not so. Not only statistically do players not land on these properties a lot, but they are very expensive to improve. The greens have a 44% chance of being landed on. And while that's higher than most, the high cost $200 per house of improving the property is definitely a huge factor in detering the investment, because in order to get money back, you have to put a lot of money in. Now, then you've got the crown jewel, where a lot of people see, oh, the most expensive property, that's the one I want to own first, right? Or that's my number one goal, is I should get the really expensive property. I'm obviously talking about Boardwalk in Park Place. And while it's alluring to want to get these properties because of their purchase price and the high rent you're going to get if you have a hotel, well, one, you have to invest a lot to get that hotel. We're talking $200 per house. Granted, you do have the advanced token of Boardwalk card that's going to send someone there, but because of the adjacencies, because of the dice rolls, landing on Boardwalk in Park Place is not exactly in everyone's game plan, and statistically, you're only going to have about a 27% chance of landing on Boardwalk in Park Place when you go around the board, which is pretty low, and considering the amount of investment you would have to put in order to improve the property, it really doesn't make these the greatest purchase. One last property to look at that is a great idea are the railroads. So there's one railroad on every side, B&O, Reading. Yes, you'll notice I said Reading Railroad, not Reading Railroad. It's pronounced Reading, but that's not important at the moment. Either way, the railroads are essentially cash cows. They're going to make you a lot of money. The more you own, the more you're going to make. And that's also because statistically, based on where they're located, not to mention the Advance to Reading Railroad card, they are going to net a lot of money for the owner. Essentially, you have a 64% chance of landing on a railroad every time you go around the board, the highest percentage of any single property or property group, even though they're split up one per side. So, yes, if you can scoop up railroads, very good idea. All right, so a quick recap of what we just went over on our tour of the Monopoly board and how statistics work into this to make you a better player. So, it all comes down to dice rolls and the board layout. The board's layout is extremely important because with things like dice roll and community chest and chance cards, you're going to be sent to different places. So having properties adjacent or close to places that you get sent to often have a huge advantage. Knowing that with 2 dice, the most often rolled number is 6, 7, and 8. Essentially, you want properties that are 6, 7, or 8 spaces away from properties that you get sent to, either by chance, community chest, landing on different spaces like the go to jail space at the top of the board. All of these contribute to the increase in the number of times you're going to pass over or land on a different property. So if you can have that perfect corner, the oranges and the reds, because of their adjacency to jail, the chance cards, the community chest cards, they can be a real hit for you. One last tip, scarcity, supplies, right? It works in real life and it works in Monopoly. What I'm talking about are the houses and hotels. So there are 12 hotels and 32 houses. No more, no less. Some people like to create house rules where they can use pennies or Tic Tacs or M&Ms to represent houses if they run out. But technically by the book, you're not supposed to do that because creating a housing shortage is part of Monopoly, and it's one of the tricks. In other words, if you have 4 houses, instead of upgrading to a hotel, if you've used up all the houses, you can prevent your opponent from buying them. You can't buy houses if there aren't any in the bank. So instead of upgrading to a hotel, you can keep more houses on your property in order to create scarcity. And if you notice, the jump in rent always happens on every single property between 2 and 3 houses. The jump between 4 houses and the hotel is not as statistically large as it is between 2 houses and 3 houses. So sometimes it's a better idea to have 3 or even 4 houses on your property as opposed to upgrading the hotel purely to keep other opponents from getting houses. All right, the number one thing, remember your goals. Your goal is to bankrupt your opponents. And if you don't keep this in mind, well, then you're not going to win the game. You're trying to get all their money. You're trying to win. And if you keep this in mind, if you think about the statistics I've laid out here, you have a much higher chance of walking away winner in every Monopoly game you play. I hope you've enjoyed this video and it was insightful, some of the statistics that go behind why certain property groups get landed on more than others. If you like this video, please share with others. Check out all the other great toy videos here on Spector Creative. We've got a lot. Thanks for watching. Comment below. I always comment back. And thanks for watching.